Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you're doing well. This is the show where we get under the hat of all things franchising, and it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's 10th of March at 5:15, and if LinkedIn is behaving itself. And because it's live, we love you to get involved. So if you are here, please pop in a comment, say hello, and get involved in our conversations. So what do? Each week on the Franchise Show, we take a new topic and we take a lovely guest. And today is no exception to that. We have a fantastic guest with us. But before we introduce you to our guest, let me speak about what the topic is today. Now, the topic today is franchise regulation. Now, it's a topic that is at the forefront of a lot of people's minds. We are at the moment in the UK unregulated specifically for franchising, and that's very similar in New Zealand. Now, before we get into the topic today, let me introduce our guest. It's Stewart Germann from Stewart Germann Law, and it's fantastic to have you with us. Stewart, welcome to the Franchise Show.
Yeah, thank you very much, Harvey. Pleasure to be back.
Absolutely. Well, we are back and we are doing this again, actually, because we were scheduled to do this a couple of weeks ago and we had a fantastic conversation, but it didn't go live on LinkedIn, which I'm glad to say it appears to be going live today. So it's going to be a great conversation. Absolutely. And look, we're really keen for you to get involved. The reason that we redid this one is because this is a conversation that is important in the industry. And whichever side of the argument you fall on, it's an important one to have a discussion about. So before we get into the topic of franchise regulation, yes or no, let's have a little introduction by yourself, Stewart, and let us know what you've been up to in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, thanks, Harvey. Yeah, so I'm a franchise attorney in Auckland, New Zealand. Some of you might have been to New Zealand. We're part of the Commonwealth, of course. And franchising is very buoyant in New Zealand. So I run a law firm. I'm also a qualified mediator, and I have another firm called the Franchise Coach, which looks at emerging franchise systems. What have I been up to recently? Well, 10 days ago, I was in Las Vegas for the International Franchise Association annual conference. So the IFA has an annual conference in February. They rotate the venue, but Las Vegas seems to be the most popular. And there were about 3,500 people there. I was part of the Australian and New Zealand delegation of 40. There were 6 from New Zealand and actually 46. There were 6 from New Zealand and 40 from Australia. Which was pretty exciting. We were the biggest overseas delegation. The theme of the convention was Evolve 26, and so everything was looking at evolving, development, changes. There were some excellent sessions. I chaired a round table on international franchising, exporting the system overseas. So if you haven't been to an IFA convention, I can wholly recommend it. And there's the International Franchise Show in London in April. The first one was last year. I think it's held at a place called Excel, which I think is like a big trade exhibit, you'll know. So I'm actually coming over to that because I've got a board meeting the following week in London. So that's worth going to. So franchising is buoyant worldwide, especially in the US. And because we're on the topic of regulation, Harvey, can I just mention an initiative that's on looking at countries at the moment, or do you want me to come up with that later?
No, absolutely. This is a free rolling conversation. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so, while people are still joining us, let's get into it. Absolutely.
So I belong to the American Bar Association. It's called the ABA, and the International Committee. So we're looking at regulation around the world and changes for the certain countries. So on the agenda, and there's different people looking at it, there's Argentina, Australia, which is always changing, Brazil, Cambodia, Canada, China, Costa Rica, France, Indonesia, Korea, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Saudi Arabia, Thailand, United Kingdom, and Vietnam.
Wow.
And New Zealand's there. I'm doing an update for New Zealand, not because we have franchise regulation, because like the UK we don't, but because there's been some law changes which will affect franchising and relationships and things like that. So that's an initiative that the ABA is undertaking at the moment. And probably within 6 months there'll be a report coming out on those country changes, which is a perfect intro to what we're talking about today in relation to the UK.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating as well. I think fascinating to see a body like the ABA tackling and getting into that conversation of regulation, not just here in the UK but across the world, and what that means. How is that? Before we get into that, because I'd like to actually touch on that and how that's going to affect and how that's going to be put into place. But before we do that, let's welcome a few people who have joined us here live already today. So first of all, let's welcome the lovely Simon Wise. And Simon, thank you for letting me use your house as well.
Where's Harvey gone? Hope Simon's paid his power bill.
See if we're live now. Yeah.
Oh, there we are. You disappeared.
Yes, I think it was something to do with the internet connection there. We will see if we are live on LinkedIn still.
Okay.
It looks like we are. So if you are there on LinkedIn, please continue with our conversation. We were just about to welcome a few people to the show. We had started with welcoming Simon Wise. Great to have you with us, Simon, as always, and thank you for letting us use your house for today's show. We have Penny Hopkinson with us. Penny has put, hello, Harvey and all franchise friends. Great to be here from a not-so-sunny Stratford-upon-Avon. Penny is, of course, one of our lovely supporters and has been for a long time. I've always supported Penny with her book. And have we got it the right way around? We have today, and here it is.
Hey.
So please, if you are looking for advice on your operations manuals, then please speak to Penny, because she's an absolute legend. And she has now launched her manual, Magic AI, where we are back on LinkedIn. Oh, I appreciate you all sticking with us. It's absolutely great fun, and we will continue. We won't let it beat us. Let's say hello to Tim as well. He's put, evening folks, great to be here. Brilliant to see Stewart on the show again. And look, we've got the fantastic Johnny Joseph. Actually, Johnny, we were talking about you before we went live today, in fact. And we were talking about the fact that you are in Los Angeles, and we have Stewart calling in from all the way from New Zealand. And I think there is a 20-hour difference between Johnny and between Stewart. So amazing to have you with us, Johnny. Let us know your thoughts on franchise regulation. So let's get into this. Great to have everybody here. Thank you for sticking with us. Get involved in the conversation, absolutely. But you were talking about the ABA and that they're looking at franchise regulation across the globe. And you mentioned a lot of countries that are on the list and being reviewed. Once that consultation has happened, and let's say the consultation happens and that it's advised that it would be a good idea to bring regulation to some of these regions, and what do you think the next step would be for that? How could that be not enforced, wrong word, but how can that be communicated to these regions? Do you work with the franchise associations? What's the next step?
No, and the government. So normally, if there's a recommendation for regulation, there'd be sort of a white paper produced by a government department. They would certainly work with the local franchise association on it, and there may be some seminars and consultation. It would be quite a long process.
Yeah.
But I can just give you an update on the USA. Okay. Because there's the American Franchise Act. So that was introduced to legislation in September 2025, so it's pretty recent. And it was a bipartisan federal bill, and it's designed to protect the international franchise business model by limiting when franchisors are considered joint employers of franchise employees. Okay. Of course, that's been a real problem in Australia with the 7-Eleven case, and also a real problem in the USA. So the IFA is very supportive of the American Franchise Act because that will streamline and give certainty in that area. Mm-hmm. So that's happening in the US. So franchising is sort of alive in many countries at the moment. It's been looked at from different angles, which is great. Yeah. And I think including the UK.
Mm. Oh, God, yeah. Absolutely. That's really interesting. I mean, we're talking here about America, of course, a part of the world that is very heavily regulated, particularly in some states, and additional regulation coming from that region, that part of the world. So it's interesting to see what comes out of that. Because my view on it is.
Oh dear, it's another internet connection problem.
Okay, cool. I think that it's really interesting to see this type of regulation coming out of America, because America's heavily regulated and...
Refresh.
Yeah, I did it. Yeah. I've got my tech department with me as well. So it's really interesting to get that regulation from the US coming in, because we can see the effect of regulation. And what I was about to say before it cut off last time, that if the effect of regulation is positive, if what is happening because of the regulation is good for the industry, then it's an interesting thing to explore. Whether regulation as a whole is good or bad, it's good to explore aspects of it, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Let's have a look at this comment from Simon. Simon's put, if we had a landscape of dispute after dispute, then maybe, but one high profile case doesn't warrant regulation. Yeah, look, this is one side of a discussion, of an argument here, that there's been some high profile cases, or a case that's going on here in the UK, that has led to this as a discussion. And look, it's really affected some people and some families, and that's tragic. And we don't want franchising to negatively affect anybody. We want it to be a good opportunity, a good business opportunity for people to enjoy themselves and to get a good thing from franchising. Give us your view on this.
Yeah, I think Simon's comment is bang on. I agree with it entirely. Last time I was on the show, I mentioned the Greenacres case in New Zealand, where a master franchisee ripped off a lot of franchisees and went to jail for fraud. So would franchise regulation have saved that? Probably not, because it's geared for a disclosure document. So the main part of regulation is the people who are going to become franchisees and buying into a system must be fully informed, with no surprises, in doing their due diligence. So countries, with regulation, franchisors are forced to publish a disclosure document which complies with the regulation. And if they don't, and they lie or have misleading statements, they can be sued, and the regulator actually can make a sweeping state order that the whole thing is void ab initio, which causes people to get their money back. So you've got to have lots of disputes as a driver for regulation. Now in New Zealand, we have franchising disputes which are resolved by mediation. There's a 97% success rate. And I think mediation is very popular in the UK as well, and the BFA promotes it. So I think Simon's hit the nail on the head there. If it was serial dispute with people losing money, yes, there'd be a huge impetus and persuasion for regulation. But I don't see it. I don't see the need in the UK. I don't see the need in New Zealand. I don't see the need in Singapore and Hong Kong. They're really the countries where there's no regulation at all. Other countries have a bit. Australia is worse than in the USA now. They're always changing their code and making it harder. And I'll give you an example, because the Australians were at the IFA in Las Vegas, and the CEO of the Franchise Council of Australia, I was talking to him, and I said, you're changing the code now necessitates franchisors to publish a disclosure document, which is about 300 pages long. It's got to have copies of all the lease arrangements, everything. And I said, no one will read 300 pages. I said, why act for lots of franchisees when we look at the franchise agreement? And I say, have you read the disclosure document you've been given? Because sometimes they're given one from the overseas system. No, we just look at the main thing. Who are the directors? We just want to know what are we going to have to pay? What are we going to pay in the future? What's the transfer fee when we want to sell? What's the renewal fee? What's the royalties? Can they be revised? So they're looking at the money side of it. You don't need 300 pages for that. And the FDD in the USA is a substantial document, but it's shorter than the Australian document now. Australia's just gone wacko. Yeah.
I think you've made a really interesting and valid point for this conversation, right? When people are on one side of this argument or another as to whether regulation should come in, most people that want it because they want to protect someone. They want someone not to have a bad time, right? That's why they want it. And the people who don't want it, they don't want it because they feel it's unnecessary in terms of a burden of paperwork, and it will cost franchisors and franchisees and the people buying those services an additional money to pay for it. But look, I think it needs to be reviewed on a case by case. If, like Simon has rightly put here, if there's lots of disputes, of which the reason for those disputes and the reason for people not having a good time in franchising can be solved by a piece of regulation, then it's important to consider it. But you make this really good point. If you make the document this big that just covers out every possible, no one can read it. No one has got the time to understand it, the consequences of it all, and therefore it starts to defeat its object. Because, like you say, then people are just sort of taking one element, one page of it, and go, "I'll read that bit."
Yes. So in New Zealand, we have a disclosure document. If you belong to the Franchise Association of New Zealand, and lots of franchisors do, you have to have a disclosure document. But invariably, that disclosure document is between 20 and 30 pages.
Right.
So it's readable, and it has headings, and you zero in on the main things. And I think in the UK, you do something similar with the BFA, which is, self-regulation, not government regulation.
Yeah.
Now, both our countries have laws to jump on franchisors who mislead, lie, deceive. We've got all that now. So in New Zealand, we've got the Fair Trading Act, which is looking at misrepresentations and misleading conduct. We've got unfair contract terms. We've now got unconscionable conduct. A lot of people can't even spell that, let alone know what it means. There hasn't been a case on yet, but there's been cases in Australia. We've got the Commerce Act, which looks at competition, unfair competition, cartels, and cartels is a hot topic at the moment. There's been a franchise system being prosecuted in New Zealand, the first case for breaching the cartels legislation. And I don't know if that's the case in the UK, where there's been a live case yet. Australia had quite a few of them. The penalties for breaching cartel legislation are extreme. Like, companies can be fined 10, 50 million, and the directors can go to jail. Wow. It's a criminal offence. So, there's regulation, there's acts there to protect franchisees, and Harvey's gone again. Oh dear. I don't know whether you can hear me now. Here we are.
And then we're back.
I don't think Simon's paid his power bill. It's a problem.
Could be.
Yeah, so I was just talking about this regulation existing, laws existing in both of our countries and in other countries to protect the underdog, the people who rely on statements and they're not true.
Yeah, that's it. Look, and we touched on this last time in the conversation, that the regulation is one part of the puzzle here, and that there are other parts of the puzzle to help protect franchisees in this situation. That due diligence is a big part of this, and that you should be encouraged as a franchisee to make sure that you do your due diligence and that you check out this franchise business in every possible way that you can to make sure that you're making the right decision. I think it's pretty important to do that. And that's going to help protect you. Speak to other franchisees, speak to other franchise businesses that are similar, because that is part of protecting you. Regulation can do some of it, perhaps. And when I say regulation, I don't just mean franchise-specific regulation. We're talking about some of the other laws that you're rightly talking about that are within the general field of law, that can help protect, like you say, cartels. And, if someone does something misleading, there are other laws that can protect. Absolutely.
Yeah, so you've got to have mount a case
Yes.
for franchise regulation and test it.
Yeah.
Okay, and so that's not to say that one day our countries will have it. It could be inevitable, but not now, because there's no driving force. There's enough help happening in the world
Yeah.
and in business that, to me, that doesn't warrant this particular focus on franchising.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's whether it warrants something is whether you should do it, and if it doesn't, then that's part of the discussion, and therefore then you don't necessarily look at it, but you've got to take it on a country by country basis and see what's happening in the franchise sector in your own region, and if I mean, you quoted there about mediation, and perhaps we should touch on mediation actually, because I think it's an important part of any discussion about regulation, because mediation is a good way of resolving something without litigation. And it's refreshing to hear you talk about that as a lawyer as well. What's your sort of
Yes,
take
well,
on mediation?
I want to keep franchising out of litigation, so that's where mediation comes in. And it's perfect because of the relationship. So in family situations with husband and wives or de facto, when they disagree, they're referred to a family mediator. And the same in business now. So when there's franchising disputes, so all franchise agreements should have a dispute resolution clause in them. And even our courts, if a franchisor or franchisee mounts a litigation claim against the other party, then at the first hearing in the court, when they're setting timetables, the judge will say, "Have you tried mediation?" And if the counsel acting say, "No, we haven't tried it," the judge will say, "Well, stop wasting court time. Go and try mediation, because it could be successful, and then we can knock this out." And so if you're getting that from the judiciary, the higher level, this is fantastic. And that didn't happen 5, 10 years ago. It's a recent trend. And I would hope that's sort of happening in the UK as well. The judges are taking on the front foot, and rather than clog the court. But having said that, dispute resolution and mediation in particular is highly successful in New Zealand, and I would say it's probably the same in the UK. But I'd be interested if someone has had an experience with mediation and comment on the UK. But as I said, it's a 97% success rate here. And if you get the parties in a room, they have to talk, and you get a skillful mediator leading the charge. And remember, a mediator doesn't make a decision. Arbitrators make a ruling, an award, and a judge gives a judgment, which is a court order. The mediators assist in the process, but they don't say, "I decide the franchisor is right." They put the parties together to work it out. It's just perfect for franchising because of the essence of the relationship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that if we can go down the route of talking and we can go down the route of mediation, then it can save a lot of money for the industry and for individual franchise companies.
Yeah.
But look, the ultimate thing here is to make sure that the industry and the people concerned are protected. This is why we have these discussions. Are they protected? But also, you've got to make your own decision as a person and as a franchisee as to whether you're doing the right thing. We want to, as an industry and as a sector, protect people, but also people have got to protect themselves and have got to look at these franchise agreements very carefully and make sure that they know what it is they're signing up to. Because if you don't check that, if you just get a franchise agreement and you just go, "Oh yeah, that looks all right, I'll sign that," and you haven't understood what you're getting into, you're very dangerous.
Yeah. Well, all members of Franchise Association New Zealand, having to comply with the code of practice and ethics, a potential franchisee must have independent legal and accounting advice. They can waive that, but all the agreements that I prepare, they have a solicitor's certificate as the last page. And basically, if you were the lawyer, Harvey, for the franchisee, you'd have to certify to me, as the lawyer for the franchisor, that you've attended the client, you've explained the franchise agreement and the essence of the clauses, and in your opinion, the franchisee understands it, and where a company is the franchisee, which is often the case, then the directors have to give personal guarantees. So as the lawyer, you've explained the effect of the personal guarantee, and to the best of your belief, you believe they understand it, and then you sign and date the certificate. Now, why do I do that with lawyers? Because it just shows that the people have had independent legal advice and they're fully informed. And sometimes people waive that right, saying, well, I thank you. I hear what you say, franchisor, but I'm not going to an independent lawyer. I don't want to waste the money on paying a lawyer and an accountant. I'm competent to due diligence when they're obviously not. And they go in with their eyes open, but they're actually shut. So the lawyers have a place to play so that people go in with their eyes open, because you don't want failure. And in my 40 years of franchising law, I find that when franchisees fail, 19 out of 20 of them blame the franchisor, because that's human nature. I failed because the franchisor is rotten, didn't update the system, didn't do that. In the odd case, that's true, but in most cases, it's not true, because people like to blame someone else. So that's why you have independent legal advice.
Yeah, absolutely. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, and today we are talking about franchise regulation and whether this is a good thing, a bad thing, or something in between those things. And I'd like to, of course, thank our sponsors, which you can see spinning across the bottom. And one of those lovely sponsors is, of course, Stewart Germann, who's with us today talking about this fascinating subject. So thank you to you all. And thank you to everyone who is here live with us, bearing with us as we dip in and out of LinkedIn. But let's have a look here at a comment. We're talking about mediation at the moment. So let's have a look at this comment here from Simon. He's put, what makes a good franchise mediator? Simon's actually trained as a mediator. So it's an interesting subject. It fits so well within the topic of regulation. But what do you think makes a good mediator? You know, is franchise experience vital, or is it experience in getting two parties to talk honestly, openly, and understand the situation?
That's great that Simon's a qualified mediator. I didn't know that. I'm one too. So in relation to franchising, if a mediator understands franchising and the relationship, it helps a lot. Having said that, I've appeared before mediators who are commercial mediators. They are not specific in franchising, but they're really good with commercial transactions of all sorts. And they're very good mediators, because basically a franchise agreement is a commercial agreement, but it brings into the relationship. So that's the sort of icing on the cake. They have to understand, the media has to understand, that franchising has a special relationship between the franchisor and the franchisee, not like normal commercial agreements where the parties don't have that relationship, that close relationship. So what makes a good franchise mediator? If they understand franchising, I think it's essential. If they've never done a franchise mediation, that's not the end of the world, as long as they're mediated, they're trained. And a key thing for a mediator is you have to be a good listener. And I find people now often don't listen properly. So people come to me as a lawyer with problems often, and you listen to the client talking about their problems. You don't interrupt. They might take half an hour. You're making notes, bullet points, because they know the fact situation. Some people can be quite emotional as they're telling their story, which is fine. And that's the same in a mediation. I've had a mediation, with the mediator has to have tissues on the table because people break down, because the facts of law or something like that. So that's fine. So be a good listener, and then always remember the relationship when you're talking to people, because that relationship might have been going quite a few years, and now there's a disagreement, and it's elevated, and that's why we're having a mediation. And the result of a mediation is either the parties stay together or they don't stay together. It's often over money, of course. But again, you can have a pleasant mediation and you can have an unpleasant one. And the unpleasant one is as if you're the mediator or the counsel, it's not enjoyable. I had one a few months ago where the person on the other side, never smiled, never spoke much, glared at people. It was unpleasant. But in the end, there was a good result. So
well, I guess
you've got to have that.
Yeah, I guess it can be difficult. It can be unpleasant. But the idea behind it is to get to a result that's going to work for two parties, and is going to untangle what they've got themselves into. And we've got a couple of good comments coming up from Julie and from Simon. Please get involved in this important subject today. The QR codes that you normally see, we've stopped putting those up just for a moment. Please make sure that you look at our wonderful supporters whizzing along the bottom, because I think it's something to do with putting the QR codes up that is making LinkedIn reset itself at the moment. So for now, please support us by seeing the lovely people that are on the bottom of the screen right now. Anyway, let's get on to a couple of comments. We've got one here from Julie. First, Julie, welcome to the show. She's put sorry to arrive late. Very interesting subject. My understanding is that failure attrition rate in the US is a lot higher than the UK, given the US has franchise legislation, and we don't. That seems surprising. Does Stewart have any thoughts, insights on that? Look, I think it's a fascinating thing here, because regulation, it doesn't solve everything. It's perhaps, if it's correctly put in place in the right regions for the right reasons, then it can have a positive effect. What's your thinking on this in the US with the regulations?
Yeah, great thoughts, Julie. Yes, so obviously the volume is a lot bigger in the US than the UK. And so when you have bigger volume with systems and more franchisees, things can happen. So yes, there is the odd failure. There can be a failure of a franchise system. There can be a failure of a franchisee who has multiple outlets. So in the US, you're getting some franchisees that they might own 40 outlets. They're actually a corporation. And you're getting multi-branding now, where they have 2 or 3 brands. So you're getting really big franchisee companies in different systems. So when you have that sort of activity, there can be failures. There can be failures of a unit franchise. The worst thing is a failure of the whole system, and that doesn't happen often, but it happens. And so I think legislation is there to try and protect franchisees, but it doesn't stop failure, and failure is a number of reasons. So it's interesting to drill down on that.
It is a really interesting point there, Julie, because we try and look at regions and areas that are regulated and regions that aren't, and try and compare the two, and what are the good and bad things from those regions. And then we take these examples where things have gone wrong, and how do we stop them going wrong again? Right? It doesn't matter what side of the regulation fence you sit on. Nobody in the franchise world wants it to go wrong.
Yes, that's right.
Have a bad experience in that. Important to get regulation in for the right reasons, isn't it?
Yeah, and the right reasons is the key thing, Harvey.
Yeah.
Not just because it's a fad and every other country has it. There's got to be a need, which is where you look at why does the UK need regulation in 26? And if there's not really good reasons, if it's only 1 or 2 reasons, it shouldn't have it. If there's 20 reasons and 100 people have suffered, well then that gives a stronger case for looking at it.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at a question here from Simon. It should be coming up in a moment. Simon's put, and there lies the problem with regulation. Can we really expect the regulators to understand the special relationship
No.
between franchisor and franchisee and the franchise life cycle?
Yeah, no, and that's the problem. They don't understand it. No, they don't appreciate the nuances of franchising. And Harvey's disappeared again.
And
I don't think you can see this show again from Simon's house.
I really don't think it's Simon's. I think it could well be something to do with my own laptop here. But look.
Oh, is it? Okay. You need a new laptop. It's getting clogged with regulation.
I think so. We are going to finish up soon. We've gone live on LinkedIn, and we've had some people that have got involved in this conversation, and that's what I wanted to do, albeit in little bite-sized pieces. And that's perhaps how we need to deal with franchise regulation.
Very good.
Trying to bring it back to the subject. Let's have a look at this one from Simon. So Simon's talking here about the special relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee and that franchise life cycle, and making sure that people understand that. And therefore, it's really important to get the right people involved, whether that's regulation or mediation, right? It's important that people, like yourself, you're advising in your region about franchise regulation, to have those experts, those people who understand it, isn't it?
It is. And my experience of government employees is that they don't understand franchising. And that's apparent when they were bringing in changes to the Fair Trading Act with unfair contract terms, and looking at the joint employer, which hasn't gone anywhere in New Zealand. So they actually don't understand it. They just treat it as any other relationship. There's nothing special about it. And that's a real problem, because if the regulator doesn't understand it and hasn't taken time to sort of drill down on the differences between the franchise relationship and a normal commercial relationship, then the legislation will be impacted to the detriment when they bring it in. So, and I'm not sure of the situation in the UK, but you probably have the regulators similar to New Zealand, and they're not fully informed. They try hard, but often they're the wrong people in the wrong slot. Can you hear me, Julie? You're putting good comments like you could hear me before.
Okay.
Oh, here we are.
Okay, I think we are going to wrap up today's conversation because these technical issues are finally beating us, I think, today. Yeah. But look, Stewart, I want to give a big thank you to you for taking your time out again to have this conversation. It is a conversation that continues. And one day I will get these technical issues sorted out, and it will all go swimmingly. Yes, so I'd like to first of all thank you, Stewart, for taking your time out today to be with us. And I'd like to thank everyone who's been with us live today and joined in this important conversation. Please do continue, put some comments on LinkedIn, and we can continue to have this conversation. And it just leaves us to discuss what's happening next week. So next week on the Franchise Show, we are talking about getting your franchise brand visible, and we're talking about citation packages, where content you put out, how you put that out, and putting that out as a good package that offers some great things. We've got a few people here that are bearing with us, and Johnny's put, I can hear now. And Julie's put, maybe I'm here alone. Look,
Yeah.
I really appreciate you all bearing with us today. It's been a fascinating conversation. Really looking forward to the next one. And thank you again, Stewart, for your time.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot, Harvey. Thanks,
And
everyone.
until next week, take very good
Yeah.
care, everyone. Cheers.